Being recorded, okay.
Sorry about that.
Okay, no worries.
Okay, so it's 4 o'clock. Should we invite everyone in?
Yes, please. Apparently you can do it all at once.
Okay. We have 26 people. Do you want me to bring them in?
Admit all. Yeah, go ahead and hit admit all.
And then watch, because more people will show up and they'll
Yeah.
go to the waiting room.
Okay. Here we go.
Mhm. Hmm.
And
Good afternoon.
Hi, everybody.
Hello. Hi.
Hey.
We've got a lot of people are muted, and
Are we supposed to be muted? Hello.
Why don't we come up there?
Okay, welcome everybody. I just muted all and I'm going to unmute our president, Nikki, so she can get the meeting started.
Nice picture.
hi, everybody. I suspect that a few more people will make their way into the room, and we'll bring them in as they show up. I'm Nikki Grafton, and I'm currently the president of the Granthams Wharf Association. And we really appreciate that you're here for our AGM. This is a first. We're all a little nervous about presenting over the Zoom platform, but we're hoping that it goes smoothly and that we can answer as many questions as possible and give you all the information. It's been just over a year since we had our last AGM at the hall, or not at our hall, but at the hall up the street. And we're hoping to be able to meet in person again for the next one. So I'm going to hand this over to Tony, and he'll start us off. We'll ask, well, I'll let Tony just tell you the rules of the road, because he has done this amazing presentation for us. He's our techie. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. So here's the agenda. You've seen this in the email invites. We've got 7 items after this little technical introduction. I hope it'll help you to use Zoom if you're new to it. And then you can see each of the items we're hoping to cover. We've got about an hour and a half, so we're going to try to move through it quickly. And here's some helpful hints. So before we jump into all the meat and potatoes, maybe we just take a breath and remember sunny days at the Wharf over the summer. That's kind of what it's all about, right? Is the center point for our community, and the GWA exists to maintain and to keep the Wharf running really well, and to help the community kind of work together and enjoy our time together as a community as well. So here's the Wharf at the best of times in the height of summer, and let's talk about using Zoom. So the first thing you'll notice is everybody's muted, right? We've got over 50 participants, or 33 participants, there we are. So if you want to make some input, you can send a question, and I'll talk about that in a minute. If it's really urgent, we can unmute people, but mostly we're just going to be unmuting the presenters, okay? So for most of the meeting, most of the people will be muted, and I think that's just for clarity. There is a way around that if you really need to, but hopefully it'll work for everybody. If you have your video on, that's great. We won't be able to see all the people at once, but you'll notice your video panel on the side has a little scroll button at the bottom and top. So you can scroll through all the participants and see who's still awake and who's not. Okay, if you want to change the display of the videos, you have these two little buttons at the top of that panel. The one on the right shows you the gallery view, which is a little video of every participant. The one in the middle there shows you just the speaker. So if you want to hide all the rest, just click that middle one and only the speaker will be shown in the video. Okay, so how will you communicate? If we've got you muted, it seems maybe a bit rude at first, but if you want to communicate to us, what we're suggesting is to use the chat panel. Let me explain how to do that if you don't know already. Okay, everybody should see a black toolbox near the bottom of your screen. It might pop up to the top, but typically by default it's at the bottom. Just run your cursor down to the bottom of your screen and a black toolbox similar to this should slide up, okay? The second tool, or one of the tools on the left, is the chat. If you click that tool, a panel will open up, which is your chat panel. That's this one here. I've got another panel opened as well. Okay. That's the chat panel. And then what you can do is type your message right at the bottom of it. Okay. Now what we're suggesting is if you want to send a message to the board, you need to select everyone on this to menu. Okay, so just above where you type, hit the to menu, a little menu will pop up and pick everyone. And that way the board members will see it and we'll try to respond to it as soon as possible, as soon as feasible at least. All right. If you want to communicate with just a particular participant, you can pick their name from that list and only that person will see your comment. Okay. Another idea is if you want to see who the participants are, you can also click this button and another panel shows up with the names of all the participants here. All right, that's optional. You don't need to do that, but we definitely recommend the chat, especially if you want to input something or ask a question during the meeting. Now, this meeting is being recorded as we speak, so after it's all over, we'll post the video up on the website and you'll be able to review it. And those folks that couldn't make it today will also be able to see it. Okay to go?
Yep.
All right. Okay, so in terms of giving feedback, in addition to the chat, we may ask for a show of hands. What we normally do in in a big room together after we've had dinner and just before we play bingo. Show of hands may still work on the video, but it's going to be problematic. If we do a show of hands, we're asking that you show your hand in front of your face so we can see it. I don't know how many people are seeing my face here, but that's the kind of thing. If we use it at all, what we may opt to do instead is to do polling. Okay, polling is a little fancier. A little window will pop up. It'll have the question that we've been discussing and several alternative answers, and you can just pick the one you want and submit it. And within a minute or so, when we have all the answers, we can display them for everybody to see. Okay, so there's at least 2 questions we're going to ask during the meeting today that we'll use polling. So when the time comes, you'll see that window. And the third way, of course, polling is informal. It's like a show of hands. It's not binding. We're not going to, record it and all that. But for official voting, we're going to use email ballots, right? Because of the pandemic and everything else. The way the email ballots will work is the GWA will send a separate email to each of the voting members on Tuesday. Okay, so just 3 days from now. And already we know that we're going to be voting on board ratification. That's kind of a legal thing we have to do, an official thing. And perhaps 1 or 2 motions rising from this minute, such as the proposed Wharf gate. So only voting members will be getting that email. We're not trying to be snobby, but the way the GWA works, according to our policies, is that to be able to vote, your household has to be up to date in their dues. So you have to have had paid your member dues in the current year. Okay. If you're not sure whether you have or not, you can go to the website under members, and I'll show that to you later. And it shows you everybody there, including yourself, whether your dues are paid for 2020 or maybe 2021. And the reason we've delayed it by 3 days is if you want to vote, if you feel excited about some of the stuff we're talking about and you're not paid up, you've got a couple of days to do that and you'll be included in that vote. All right. So we're moving on to the first topic. This is the Wharf Maintenance Report. Our #1 man, project manager, Mike Bothma, couldn't make it. He's super busy. He's doing a great job for us at the Wharf. So I'm going to just quickly go through his report for us. So in 2020, we've had a number of issues, nothing major like we had in 2019, of course, with a huge rebuild project, but a few minor issues. The first was the huge gap, 6 or 8 inch gap between the pier and the top of the ramp. And unfortunately, we've had a couple of accidents. One was serious enough and the people were really good about it. So we definitely needed to address it. And what Mike did together with Chris Robertson is that he found a good heavy duty mat, bought it, had it installed, and it now serves to cover that. It's much safer crossing between the pier and the ramp. So we thank Mike and Chris for that. Another place where Mike shone is we had a pretty bad storm in late September. It might have been early October that broke 3 of our 4 connectors holding the floats together, right? So they were kind of bent all over the shape. We tried tying them up temporarily and it just got worse and worse. So we were able, with the help of the community, Mike was able to get the floats put away, really, really quickly. I mean, we only gave 30 minutes notice for one of those work parties and this other work party had 60 minutes notice. Nonetheless, we had a good turnout and we were able to get the job done. A new thing, I mean, some of us will miss, maybe not during the pandemic, but some of us will miss that wonderful mussel scraping party we had every fall up in the park on Elphinstone, where we hauled the floats up and everybody got their tarps and shovels and garbage cans and pickup trucks and wheelbarrows and scraped all the mussels off, took them back down to the sea and dumped them in the sea. Well, it was a lot of fun, but it was super inefficient. So what we did this year, I think this was Mike's idea as well, is as we were hauling the floats off the beach in Gibson's Harbor, 4 people with big heavy duty scrapers managed to get all the mussels off, and just left them there on the beach. The geese and the duck were very happy. They feasted on them and then the tide came in and took them away. So that took less than an hour. And I think that's probably what we're going to do from now on. Okay. We borrowed some scrapers. We did have one donated. If you have a big scraper and know where we can get them, then let us know. And finally, we put another sign up. It's one we had in stock or in inventory for a while. It's a large members only sign. You probably haven't noticed it because it's on the far side of the dolphin. And it's to inform non-GWA boaters that, they're approaching a private dock. And unfortunately, unless they sign up and become a member, they're not really welcome on the dock. I know that sounds kind of rude, but we do have a lot of questions around the number of people using the wharf, and that'll come up soon. Okay, so I think that's it for issues resolved. Now, we still have a couple of outstanding problems not resolved. Those float connectors that broke apart in the storm a couple of months ago, they need to be replaced. And again, Mike's on it. They were delivered this week and Mike's looking to install them. Now, his typical go-to people are away. So anybody that can help Mike with that installation, you can email Granthams Wharf and we'll make sure he gets your message, or you can reach out to Mike directly. Okay, if you can help him to install. We're going to be installing those connectors on the floats in the park in preparation for their use in the spring, of course.
Mhm.
If you ever took a look at the bottom of the ramp, the ramp that connects the pier to the floats, the wheels do no longer qualify as wheels. They're more triangular shaped. They don't roll, they just kind of scrape along. So we need to get those replaced. Anybody that wants to help or has a lead on that kind of stuff, more than welcome to participate. And we had a big problem this year in the rush trying to get the ramp up on top of the pier. We do have a block and tackle now, so it's not all just muscle and brawn. There's a bit of brains, but we do need a roller or some type of block to slide the ramp along. Those of us that were there, you know what I'm talking about, the difficulty we had and the potential damage we're causing to the ramp and the pier as we slide it along. So anybody that has any ideas on some heavy duty rollers that we can install at the end of the pier, at least at, you know, when we're pulling the ramp up in the fall and putting it back in the spring, if we could use that roller or a block or something along those lines, that would be much appreciated as well. Okay, good.
Tony,
Yes.
before you leave the wharf maintenance,
Yeah.
I'd just like to add, I mean, I personally, physically do no wharf maintenance, and many of us don't, but I would really encourage anyone who's got a little bit of interest in helping to keep the wharf physically in good shape, please let us know. And Mike could really use a list, a good long list of people that he could call, because often it's the same 2 or 3 people that are doing these heavy last minute things that happen around the sea. The storm comes up and, you know, something breaks, and or, you know, it's always the same people. So I really encourage you to get more involved. It's a lot of fun to be involved. And so if you can, do let us know. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Nikki. Thanks for that. All right, that was Mike's report, Mike Bothma. This is my report now. So I'm a director and I'm responsible for membership. And I'm just going to throw a bunch of numbers up here, but they are meaningful. First of all, you'll notice that this is the total count of members, right? These are individuals at the top, and you can see how going from right to left, we've grown over the last 4 years. The 5th year now, 2020, we've got 257 members. And this is why I mentioned earlier, you know, we do have some concerns about number. The more the merrier, but once we get up to a certain limit, a certain threshold, then it may become problematic. We'll talk about that more as time goes on. But this is a positive thing, you know, especially since 99% of our members live in Granthams, right? So it's a community organization, and the more people that join in, the better it is. Now, those are individual members on our email list. Not everybody gets an email. There might be spouses where only one gets an email, or there might be the odd child or, you know, teenager on the list, and they fall under their parents' email. So we really only send emails to about 200 people every time an email goes out. Every time you get one of those GWA emails in your inbox, you know that 195 other people also got that email. Now, the unit that we really use for all our GWA business, for voting, for dues, are households. We're going to talk about households in a bit. But we have 163 households, and you can see how that's grown in the last 5 years, right? We've added 31 households to the GWA, okay? So we're very healthy. This is what we want. You know, I think this is over 50% of the residents, depending on how you define Granthams, but it's a pretty healthy number of the households in the community are part of the GWA to some extent. Now, anybody can join the GWA, Granthams residents in particular. You don't have to be a voting member. You can just be on the email list and, you know, and participate hopefully in events and help out in work parties. But to be a voting member, we need to pay our dues, of course. So this is a voting households. And what we're doing here is comparing the total number of households with those that are up to date on their dues and can vote, etc. Okay. So this year, you can see it's also been increasing, and not only the actual magnitude, but the percentage has been increasing too, which is very positive, right? We're just over 1/3 of all households 5 years ago, and now we're breaking 50. Now, at this point, we're only at 46%, but still pretty healthy. Considering that 2020 was the brutal year of the pandemic, we didn't have Granthams Day, we didn't have our bingo night, you know, we didn't have the socials that we normally do where many people pay their dues. People have been just paying their dues over the internet or, you know, dropping a check off, etc. So the other thing, of course, is we still have 3 weeks almost before the end of the year. So I'm hoping those of you that want to vote, or those of you that want to fully participate in the GWA, will pay your dues and we'll break this 52% mark and keep on increasing, okay? We only need about 8 households to get up there. Okay, so that's basically the numbers. You can see it's healthy. We're moving in a positive direction. I also just want to throw up here the numbers for the boat rack. And those are also increasing. The boat rack's always been full, except for the very first year. Now, it really holds 18 watercraft, but there's a couple of posts that haven't been installed. And anybody that wants to volunteer to install those gets a free year on that in that space. So 17 out of 17 are filled. You notice the dinghy dock is also full, and now we're getting a bit of overflow on the hillside. There's 4 watercraft there, owned by 3 Granthams residents, and we're kind of looking at this being a spillover from the boat rack, right? So we may implement policies. There's a couple of families or households that have 2 spots and they pay for 2 spots on the boat rack. We might have to limit those to 1, or we're going to have to look at building maybe not as fancy a boat rack, but some kind of facility on the hillside on which we can rest our canoes and kayaks and maybe lock them up. All right, so that's it. If you like a more graphical presentation, here's a quick one here. So GWA members over the last 5 years has been increasing from just over 200 to just over 250. Email list likewise. Households, we're going to talk about households in great detail. And then paid households or voting households, voting members. And you notice the dip, as I said, because we're not at the end of the year and the pandemic has adversely affected the numbers of people participating. Okay, we're good. Now,
Tony,
go ahead, please, Nikki.
it's me again. I just want to kind of clarify some language that we use. Tony was talking about membership dues, and that's how we define the difference between a Granthams member, someone who's interested and wants to be part of the community on our list, or someone who is more committed in financially and wants to be able to vote on the issues that affect the community. It's not dues. What you pay to the Granthams Wharf Association, we consider to be a donation. And there's a good reason for doing that, and that's because we are a charitable organization and we can give you a charitable receipt, but not if it's considered to be a fee or a due or that you have to pay. That's why it's completely voluntary. Okay, so when you do support us financially, you're helping to keep that wharf alive, and we did that big time in 2019. But your annual donation goes a long way for us. We've been able to establish some savings so that in the event of another catastrophe, we've got some money in the bank. We can consider investing further on in our wharf because of it. So, and you get a charitable donation receipt. So please consider that when you're deciding. Thanks.
Thanks, Nikki. Okay, if you're wondering, you don't have to wait for the AGM to get a look at those numbers, right? This is the page I referred to earlier. It's the members page on our Wharf website. And that website's in the signature of every email you get. So if you're not sure what it is, you can find it there. But all the statistics I just read are updated, monthly or semi-monthly here. And this is where you can look up your name alphabetically on the left and figure out whether you've paid or not for 2020 or 2021. Okay, so that's on our website. Also, the stuff that Nikki was referring to, you can join the GWA and you can also donate to the GWA. And there's lots of ways to donate. It's $50 a year per household. We talked about that. You can pay more if you want. We won't, we'll be happy to accept it, but 50 is the minimum. And if you do want to if you can use the boat rack or the hillside or the dinghy dock, that's an additional $50. And unlike your $50 donation, we loosely call it dues, but it is a donation, as Nikki said, which is tax deductible. This $50 watercraft fee is not tax deductible. You do get a receipt every year automatically in January or February, but this watercraft fee is not included. If you want to know how to donate or how to pay your dues, there's 4 different ways to do it right here. Okay. And there's always the old-fashioned way, our little red mailbox right at the beginning of the pier there, okay, with all the notes above it. And the good news here is I had the key. I don't know why I kept that key. I would go down there once a month and forget to bring the key with me. Anne is now on the board, and she lives 2 doors away, and apparently she checks it multiple times per week. So that's a lot better. So if you put something in there, you don't have to wonder a month later whether it's been picked up or not. It's being picked up at least every week, if not sooner. Okay, good. Now, I'm just mentioning this. This is for your information. We're not going to have a vote. We can discuss it, but really it's maybe something we can discuss in the future. But a longtime member of the community asked us this question, raised it with us. We discussed it as a board, and I just want to pass on that information to you. Now, historically, we don't define or enforce boundaries. We don't really have any fixed boundaries. I mean, Granthams Landing is not a corporation or an official town or village, right? It's a community, and it's growing in leaps and bounds. You know, originally the Fisher was considered the upper limit, then Chamberlain, and now maybe it's Stewart or who knows what. So we don't really go there. So basically anybody in the community or nearby are welcome to join the Granthams Wharf Association at this point in time, at least. And I would say the vast majority, like 98% or 99%, are members of the GWA are also members of the community. Okay, but you know, some good members, some good folks have moved away from Granthams, but they still pay their dues, you know, and they want to continue to be part of the GWA, including our illustrious president, our chair, Nikki, who just recently left her place on Central and is moving over to Soames, right? We also have a small number of people who have called us up and said they want to be part of it, and we haven't said no. I mean, they've paid their dues and they're on the list. So that's where we sit right now. If it's something that we want to discuss at some future time. The reason I'm not bringing it up now is we've already got a lot of stuff on the table for this meeting, and we should probably stick with that for now. Okay, it's pouring rain down here, so it's a good time for me to sign off and pass it over to Nikki and Anne.
Okay, thanks, Tony. So you're going to put the, we're going to just do a quick report on the financials. I want to thank Anne Osterhaus for volunteering to take on the treasurer's position this year. And that was a position that I held for, I think, about 5 years. Seems like I've kind of lost track of the years. And so it was a welcome volunteer opportunity. And at the same time, Tony needed to step sideways and we shuffled the board positions a little bit. So we are your directors, we're your board, we're volunteers, we each have sort of an area of responsibility that we try to take care of with each other's help. But Anne and I have been tag teaming now to prepare for this AGM, and from now on it will be Anne's. But I did do the 2019 year end. It's been up on the website for some time, but I haven't had opportunity to present it to you. And I just want to quickly go through that 2019. And if there's any questions, please let me know. Okay. So we started raising funds for the Wharf rebuild right at the end of 2018. So we recognized in some of that on our 2018 revenue, and the rest of it we recognized in 2019. So that was the biggest amount of revenue that the GWA had in that year. And but our total our membership donations were, you can see that 2018 we're at 4,000 and we went down to 3,300 in 2019 because we were also busy giving money for the rebuild, I believe, and spending money on our fundraisers. We actually really pulled together as a community, and it shows up in these numbers. And then down in our expenses here, the big number, of course, is the rebuild, and that all happened in 2019. Thanks, Tony. Thanks for using your pointer. We ended up with a net deficiency in that year, but remember the year before we had this big excess of income, and that was from the donations that came in that year, but we didn't have any rebuild expenses yet on the books. So it does show a deficiency in brackets, but by the end of the statement, you'll see that we had, well, we just went past it. Anyway, that's fine. We had, yeah, I was just going to point out this number, that our net fund balance ended up being over 12,900. Okay, and that's the operating income that the Wharf Association has to work with. That's even after we rebuilt the Wharf. So we can go on to the next sheet. And here we've, you'll see that the bank had 25,000, and that included, we're still holding on to special funds that was raised for our hall, but we haven't decided yet what we're doing with that. And that's really, that's once the hall can be used by us, we'll undoubtedly get our committee together and find ways to use that for the hall. And then we established for the very first time a capital fund, so that in the future, we've got some savings for major capital expense for the Wharf. So I'm really pleased with our 2019 financial position. And then that went on into 2020. And Anne, you can speak to 2020 now.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nikki. So we prepared an interim financial report up till the end of November of this year, January 1st to November 30th. And we have, I'll just get my own sheet because this one doesn't seem to be loading completely. Oh, there we go, it's loading. Okay. So regarding the income, this would be year to date. Our total income is $8,697.60. And as you can see, it's segregated into the members' donations, $5,012.60, boat storage and moorage, $1,150. And the proceeds for the fundraising, which all had to do with the cards and prints, jam pointers, cards and prints, which was a substantial, whoops, that's okay, which was a substantial $2,535. Then we have the expenses year to date. The total expenses were $4,311.17. And as you can see, the costs are included here and broken down. The fundraising costs for the Jan Pointer images came to $2,002.12. And then we had a deposit that we made to the Heritage Theater of $100, which, by the way, hasn't happened yet. But anyway, the insurance, $2,102.12.
No.
Sorry, pardon me. I'm looking sidelines here. Insurance is $725. And repair, maintenance, and improvements, $296.45. Towing for the floats, $861. Website expenses, $230.47. And then the other expenses, which involve property tax and filing fees, of $96.13. So we subtract that from the total income. That brings us to an excess of income over expenses of $43.86.43. So the bank balance as of December 31st, 2019 was $25,014.11. Then we have cash on hand, which was $600. That would represent donations that we received that had not been deposited yet, or had not been deposited by November the 30th. And then we have the excess of income over expenses, which, as I said, was $43.86.43. So the bank balance as of the end of November was $28,800.54. And so just to show that $5,275 of that amount is held for the Granthams Hall Fund, which Nikki explained just prior to this, and $12,000 for which is the Wharf Capital Cost Fund, in case we need it for rebuilding, maintaining the wharf. So our healthy bank balance is at $11,525.54. And there we have it.
Thanks, Anne. So we're in good shape. And our annual expenses from year to year have averaged anywhere from, say, $3,500 to $6,000 for regular operating and repairs annually. So as you can see, we have some excess going into 2021, and there's maybe one or two expenses yet to be paid before the end of the year. So we are in good shape. It doesn't mean that your dues or your, I see, I use that word, I fell into it, your donations aren't still needed and appreciated, because I'd like to continue building that capital fund. And we have some other ways of possibly spending some money. And so I'll leave it at that for now. Thanks, Tony.
I think Cheryl's going to come in now and talk about the fundraising.
So the fundraising efforts were to be twofold, and we only were able to do one of them because we had to shut down the November event due to COVID. What we did do was sell these note cards and prints and canvases based on Jan's 6 images that she donated to us last year. And so what we did was we sold 6 single cards, 36 6-packs, where there's one of each of those cards included, 14 prints, and 10 canvases. So what we have remaining are 6 prints, 2 canvases, and those, that if anybody wants a print or a canvas, I have some of those right on hand, so that I wouldn't have to order them and you wouldn't need to wait if you need a quick gift. I have 28 single cards and 51 6-packs left. So they're for sale, and you can contact me or use the order form on the website to get them. The second fundraising event was to have been a film in the Heritage Hall, Bye Bye Blues, with the director Ann Wheeler present, and that was canceled. Anne's book, which we were launching at the same time, has come out. It's called Taken by the Muse, and it's available in Tailwind Books. I saw it there today. And it's also available in the library, and it can be ordered and mailed for you from annwheeler.com, her website. So it's a good Christmas stocking stuffer, as are these note cards. So it would be wonderful to unload some of these cards now, because everything we make from now on is gravy. It's we've covered all of our expenses with some funds now collecting from these sales, and everything else we sell will be profit. Contact me, order these if you want them. Oh, and our $100 deposit for Heritage Hall is being held for us, where our deposit is well, the money spent, but we have a place held for us in Heritage Hall so that we can have that event next year. That's it for me.
Thanks a lot, Cheryl. Yeah. So we're on to GWA Business, and here's where we've got a few topics that have been posed and that we want to get your feedback on. So Tony mentioned that that the definition of household is something that we've been thinking about, we've been asked about. The question has come up in relation to the short-term rentals that are popping up all over Granthams, as well as the greater community. And I guess the concern about how many people are using the Wharf. So we're proposing a possible policy change that we want your opinion on. The GWA definition of household. As Tony said earlier, the current definition is that it's a family or other group of people living in the same residence, and a household is the basic unit of the GWA membership. And annual dues, donations, and voting are based on households, paid up households. Once the donations are paid, the household becomes a voting member, 1 vote per household. That's how it works now. And so what we are considering is extending that definition to cover the situation of a multi-unit household. So, you know, an Airbnb suite in the basement, or in the cottage on the property, or it could be a certainly has come up with the post office development as a question. And so we're considering expanding it so that each self-contained unit at the same address would become a member in order to have use of the wharf. And that, whether it's a long-term residential unit, you know, rented out year-round, or whether it's short-term vacation units. So the unit itself, we're saying, could be required to become a GWA member. That is to pay the membership donations each year. And in the case of the long-term tenant, we would hope that that tenant who wants to be part of the Wharf membership would do that themselves. But in the case of the short-term vacation rental business units, that the owner would pay for multiple memberships, so that they can offer the use of the Wharf to their visitor. Right now, the way it is if my grandkids come to visit, they are just my company, and they're allowed to come to the Wharf with me. I mean, we all bring guests. But when it's a business, we are considering looking at it differently. So we want a poll to see what you think about the changing the way that we think about the household unit in terms of contributing financially to the Wharf, as well as having use of the Wharf. So Tony, can you put the poll up? So hopefully you all see that. So we just want to know if you think it's a good idea to extend this definition, and we can further refine this. We're going to be open to input. So do you think it's a good idea? Do you think it's a bad idea? Or you're uncertain? And if you can click on your idea at this point, we'll be able to see where this group of people stands, so that we know as a board whether it's something that we should even bother going any further with or not. And then you hit this, once you've clicked one of those buttons, and then you hit the submit button, and we'll receive that. Okay. Tony, do you want to add anything to that?
No, that's great. That's it. I think it's clear what we're talking about. Again, this is not a binding vote or anything. As Nikki said, we just want an idea whether the board should pursue this or not. And if there is enough interest, we may send it out in the email ballot on Tuesday to voting members to act on it. So I don't mind telling you, I'm watching it as the votes come in. We've got 34 out of 38. So there's 4 people. We'll give you another 10 seconds or 20 seconds to answer if you've got that on your screen. But so far, the majority is in favor. I'm going to share it now, I think. Yeah. Okay, so everybody can see that now. There's 44% think it's a good idea, 29% a bad idea, and a full quarter of us maybe aren't sure, there's not enough information or enough time to think about it.
Okay, well, it's something that can just sit on the back burner then, in my opinion.
Yeah. Well, let's discuss it as a board. Maybe we can send it out to in the next GWA news.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, good. So we're good with that.
Cheryl would like to say something, I think. You can unmute yourself, Cheryl.
Well, I'm just noticing the feedback that I'm getting here, or the chatting that I'm getting with regard to this issue. And I think it's worth bringing it up for all of us, because a paying membership does 2 things. It allows one to vote, and we're saying now it allows somebody to use the Wharf. And maybe there's some confusion there. It would be one thing to have people paying and then using the Wharf, and they don't have an investment in the community. But there's another thing for them to be able to vote on matters if they're not members of the community. So I see a problem, and why I think 29% are saying it's a bad idea and 26% aren't sure. Maybe that's one of the issues that is making people unsure.
Okay. Thanks, Cheryl. Let's dive into this a little bit more then, okay? I don't have a pointer on the screen, but Cheryl's point is well taken, and it is addressed here, although it may not be really clear. So what we're saying is any additional unit on the same property would be another unit to be considered as a household. If somebody has a property that's vacant, or like a unit that's vacant, doesn't matter. If they have a unit that's occupied by somebody that has no interest in the Wharf, that we have no say, of course. We're just a community organization. But if if you own a house and you have a separate self-contained unit on your property that you either rent out on the long term, you've had the same tenant for many years, or you rent it out through Airbnb for short-term residents, what we're saying in the GWA now is, should we consider that unit as a separate household, and should we receive membership donation for that unit? Okay, that's really what we're saying. Now, in terms of voting rights, if you look at the fine print here, if it's a long-term tenant, you have a flat, the same person's been living there for 5 years, 2 years, whatever, that person ideally would join themselves, would pay the dues and become a member. And if they pay their dues, they're a voting member. Whether they rent or own in Granthams doesn't matter. You're a voting member if you've paid your dues. But if it's a short-term vacation unit, a guest house, whatever, a cabin, those guests would not be voting members. You see that right here in this bullet. Short-term guests do not become voting members. As a matter of fact, even though the owner is stuck with paying multiple memberships for his own household and for these additional 1 or more units, the owner does not get any additional voting rights either, right? So the short-term vacation rentals don't count as voting members. Does that answer your concern, Cheryl, and maybe the concern of...
Well, I'm wondering if it answers the concern of some of the people who have voted against this, because I'm wondering what is the concern there?
Yeah, we're getting a lot of comments here on this.
Good.
So yeah,
Good.
this is good. It's a good discussion. Time-wise, we probably don't want to get into it. I'm not sure, Nikki, what do you think?
This is something, I wonder if our chats get recorded.
Yeah, we can save them, yes.
Okay, I think we need to, and then as a board, we can read them just like we read your emails and discuss them. And then address it like you said, come back to it, because
Yeah.
we're not, there isn't enough clarity to ask people to make a decision at this point, I don't think.
Yeah, and to be honest, it's
So-
a bit awkward with an online meeting. If we were face to face, we could sort it out in 10 minutes. But we're ahead of time. We still have a couple of minutes, but I don't think we can really address it fully based on the volume of comments. I will say though that the next topic does perhaps have a bearing on a number of these comments. So maybe we should just move to that. There's some overlap between them, and it might satisfy some of the folks. Okay. Now the
Okay,
board,
but-
if you go ahead.
We will come back to it. We will come back to it in either in the newsletter, and we'll ask for feedback if we don't have enough yet.
Right.
We will look at these chats as long as we can review them again.
Yeah.
And because I think it's an important thing for us to all understand and be comfortable with before we say
Right.
yay or nay.
Right.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. Let's go with that. I appreciate the comments. I'm sorry we can't respond to all of them right now. And if we have time at the end, which is unlikely, maybe we can come back to them in this meeting. But as I said, the next topic, actually, Nikki has a little bit more to do, and then we're going to cover another topic that overlaps this whole discussion. Okay, Nikki, back to you.
Okay, what else do I have to do?
Just the board of
Oh,
director.
that's right. This is very important. This is an official piece that, we kind of stand up. Like I said, we're a volunteer board and we've never turned anybody away. But we still do need your ratification for the Societies Act, as well as a charitable organization. And so our board, I'm going to ask the board members to put their hand up, and just so that they're clearly identified. So right now there's one missing, and that's Mike Bothma. And he took on he's a director, and helps us make decisions, and he's an amazing Wharf manager. And then we have Tony, who's been our long-term leader and supporter, and he's our membership director right now. And Chris Robertson is our secretary, and do anything you ask him guy. Cheryl is vice president at this time, and has been leading the charge on fundraising. And Ann Osterhaus am I pronouncing Oosterhouse right? Ann? Oh, it's okay. She's muted. You know Ann. Anyway, so Ann is our new treasurer, and has joined the board this year, during the year. So we need ratification of that slate of directors that will come on the voting ballot. So thanks for letting us introduce ourselves.
By the way, Nikki, it's pronounced Osterhaus.
Osterhaus, thank you so much. I've pronounced it 3 different ways tonight. And there was something that went in and out of my mind on the board. Oh, yes. And as always, we are open to nominations and enthusiastic volunteers to join the board. So please, if you're interested,
Nikki, you're on mute.
Nikki, I'm afraid you're muted right now.
Oh,
There you go.
I'm so sorry. Okay, I don't know how that happened. That's probably a good thing. Maybe it's time for me to sign out then.
Thanks, Nikki. So, yeah, anybody that wants to join this happy team, you're more than welcome. I think that's what Nikki was saying
That's
when she
right.
got muted. All right, so we have, we're actually right on the money at 5 o'clock. We're supposed to be starting this topic. A couple of hot topics, you know, most people in the neighborhood are reasonable and we want to get things done and we need to communicate and cooperate as much as possible. The first one is a discussion about the Wharf Gate, and I'm going to lead this discussion. Again, comments are welcome. We may not be able to respond to them as quickly as I thought, but we will be doing a poll as well on the Wharf Gate, just an initial polling to try to gauge the level of interest of the membership. Okay, so not official. We're not going to be held to this, but just to give us an idea. Okay, so just to give you some introduction about the gate, it would be a gate at the wharf entrance, perhaps looking something like this. We're not exactly sure, but similar to this, just off the concrete patio. You know, you go down the stairs, walk across that patio and up a step, and somewhere right in there at the beginning of the pier would be this gate. Now it's locked to enter, but it's never locked to exit, right? You can always push the door open from the inside without any code or anything else. Besides the gate, we'd have some infill barriers like you see here, these little fences to the side to prevent people from climbing around or over it. And it's similar to the gates you see at the harbor in Gibson's Marina and Hyack. And also, if you've noticed the small docks off to the north side of the ferry terminal, they also have a similar coded gate. The gate would be unlocked with a 4 or 5 digit code. We're not going to be, this is a big if, of course, but we're not going to be considering a gate that has keys or cards, nothing tangible, just a 5 or 4 digit code. And that code, for obvious reasons, would be changed regularly, monthly perhaps, we don't know. And here's the question. This is kind of responding to a couple of comments that have already been posted in the chat panel there. That code could be distributed to GWA members. Like it could be all GWA members, but we have an opportunity here maybe to consider distributing it only to the members that have paid. And that's a passive way to encourage people to pay their fees. I mean, you'll notice in the past, we might have applied a little bit of social pressure, but it's totally passive. Nobody tries to enforce payment of fees or donation, you know, the membership donation. Nobody stands down at the bottom of the wharf and checks you off a list. The only thing we do based on policy is before you vote, we want to ensure that you're paid up. But this may be an opportunity to kind of move it up a notch so that people that want to use the wharf at least, they'd be more likely to pay their dues early in the year and to pay them at all if they haven't in the past. Okay, so that's something to consider, and that's coming up in the poll. Now here's our first quote. It's just under $7,000, and that's with an option for a solar power supply. So we don't have to run power to it. It runs on a 24-watt solar panel. Okay, so that's some basic ideas about the wharf, about the gate at the wharf. Now, here's a couple of comments. These were solicited back in an email a few months ago. These were written comments. There's been hundreds of spoken comments, which I haven't recorded. But here you go, and you may recognize them if it's your own, but they're all anonymous. So a coded gate would definitely help keep unwanted people away. A gate would reduce unwelcome guests significantly. It's what many of the private wharfs have done, and we have essentially what's a private wharf. This one's a little heated maybe. It's about time the GWA put its money where its mouth is, meaning the signs are clearly not working and nobody wants to stand guard. We did try to establish a wharf watch and it's still around, but basically what it means is phoning up somebody on the list and having them come down and politely tell the unwelcome guests to leave. Another comment from a member, we've noticed large groups on the wharf on a number of occasions. So these people have been avoiding using the wharf, especially with the pandemic. And someone else said, I'm glad that there will be an email ballot. In the last 2 years, and in particular this past summer, our dock has been discovered. And maybe many of us feel this way. I hate the idea of a gate, but we are considering it. Okay, so a couple of slides for introduction now. A list of pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages that have come from the board and from members who have responded to our requests. Okay, so first the disadvantages. Number one, it's not foolproof. I mean, we're fooling ourselves if we think this is bulletproof. We all know the way our wharf works. Unauthorized visitors can just swim to the floats if it's a nice, hot, sunny day. As a matter of fact, at low tide, you can just walk to the floats at really low tide. Determined individuals can often climb around and over the gate and open it up from the inside. And of course, the access code can be shared carelessly or generously, depending on how you look at this. It is an inconvenience for those GWA members who belong, you know, and pay their dues in particular. It is a bit of an inconvenience, especially if you forget the code. And it is a significant change in policy and maybe, you know, in appearance. Because some people have said it seems elitist, exclusive, not really community minded. But anyway, that's the drawbacks. And of course, it's a major expense, almost well, with tax, it would be $7,000. But as Nikki pointed out earlier, you know, our capital account is fairly healthy. It's healthy until we have another big storm, perhaps. And we do have $11,500 in the operating budget. So this is a good time financially to consider a gate. So those are the drawbacks. The benefits, definitely limits unauthorized visitors to the wharf. And that's especially important for large groups that seem to want to come to our wharf. It emphasizes the private nature of the wharf. Even if somebody is able to circumvent a locked gate, it's obvious. You can ignore a sign, but you can't really ignore a feature like a gate. A member also suggested that it may limit our liability in an accident situation for somebody that's not a GWA member. And especially with the protocols now around COVID-19, it may help to enforce. Reduces dependence on our volunteers on the Wharf Watch team. And the quote we've got, I mean, we'll get additional quotes if we decide to go forward, but I think we've got a fairly fair quote from someone who's a friend of Granthams, who comes to the wharf as one of our friends from time to time, and that's Doormaster, who lives in Hopkins Landing. And as I mentioned earlier, it's passive enforcement of, it can be at least, you know, it's something we have to discuss and decide, but it can be passive enforcement of membership dues, where the code is emailed only to households that have paid their dues for the current year. And that's fairly easy to do with the system that we have in place. We just create an email list of those that are paid up and send the code to them. Okay, now, you know, it's not, I mean, we live in a world where we lock our cars and our houses now, unfortunately, and we have tons of passwords to access, you know, secure websites, etc. So this is maybe part of living in the world we live in. It's not something we desire, but it may be something we have to consider. So we're going to put out another poll for informal feedback and maybe follow up with an email ballot. Let me get that ready. Okay, here it goes. If you don't mind, just based on the information presented, give us your idea. Again, it's not binding, it's just for information only.
And the polls are anonymous. We don't see who our vote is from.
Well, I can tell you the results are a little surprising. It's very strong in one way or the other. Now we have 34 of 38 again. So those 4 folks that fell asleep for the first poll are still asleep. So let me share those with you. 34 out of 38, that was quick. And as you can see, 76% of the people participating in the meeting think it's a good idea. And 9% think it's a bad idea. And 15% are not sure. So we have a pretty clear mandate that, Nikki, that we could follow up on this.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's not a formal vote. It will go out on ballot, but what we've heard here indicates that there's enough people that feel fairly strongly.
Right.
So, yeah, I, you know, I think that that'll go on the ballot.
Okay, good. Now, we do have a couple of comments. There's just a couple on this, so if you don't mind, I'll read them quickly. I'm one of those who don't like the idea, but feel that it may be necessary and agree that it should be left to voting members. And someone else saying gate access is for paying members only. And another person says, I agree, any gate code should only be supplied to annual paying voting members. Okay, and Emily Cook would like to speak. Oh, Emily says it goes against the Constitution. Maybe you better send that to us in an email, Emily.
Well, would you mind if I just said something really quickly?
Oh, are you there, Emily?
Yes, yes, I'm
Oh,
here.
yeah.
Yeah.
Hi,
Hey,
everyone.
Nikki.
Hi, Emily.
Hi, my name's Emily. I'm fairly new to Granthams. I moved here about a year ago. And I have a lot of experience working for nonprofits and charitable organizations, and I've been on boards before. I totally see the reasons why people want to have a gate, the frustration around the crowds on the dock and everything like that. But the Constitution really clearly says that the wharf exists for the benefit of the community. It doesn't say the wharf exists for the benefit of the GWA members only and exclusively. And I'm worried that if we completely restrict the access of the wharf to the community, whether people are able to pay for a membership or not, then how are we acting thus as a charitable organization anymore? Like, I think if you want to put a gate up, then we'd need to actually change the structure of the society and the Constitution.
Would we
Anyway.
need to edit the Constitution? That's what we'd need to do, perhaps. We'd have to look at that. But that's doable. I mean, that it's our Constitution. Now, the only reason we're looking at this is we are an organization that wants to make the wharf available to the community, but you've got to remember that the community is paying for the wharf, or at least part of the community is paying for the wharf. So, you know, there's a bit of responsibility versus rights here, which, you know, we can discuss at length later. Go ahead, Nikki.
I think that I really appreciate your input, Emily. And I guess it's kind of the basis of my my position on this. I'm firm. I'm not sure, because the definition of community, we're talking about our Granthams community as well as the community at large, and we've, you know, and so that's that's part of the difficulty. But at the same time, there are only, you know, there's this small group of people who put all their time, energy, and their money into maintaining this asset that we have basically, you know, protected from being demolished by the government. And they feel just as passionate about protecting it and protecting the right of the people who do the work to be able to enjoy it. So it's a tough conundrum. But I hear you clearly, and we would really have to look at that position that we might put ourselves in inadvertently before we go ahead full steam.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's our responsibility to do that. You know, maybe Emily, you'd like to speak with the directors on that. give us some more input.
Okay. Thanks for that.
Yeah, I'm definitely happy to talk more to the directors and give some input. I love the community and I paid my dues this year, and I'm happy to get more involved. So,
Yeah.
Good. That sounds great. Thanks, Emily. And Nikki, I think we have to close it. There's another half a dozen comments that have come in.
Yeah.
I think everyone who's got their chat panel open can read those comments. You know, there's some great ideas there, stuff that we have to discuss, but we are out of time. It's 5:16, and we have to move to the last topic. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely.
Well, thanks very much, folks, for your input on that. And the last topic, of course, is discussion, or at least an update, on the 808 Marine Development, known as the Lodge here in Granthams. Now the owners have volunteered, have offered to respond to the questions that have come in from Granthams residents. There's been a lot of talk, but there's also been a number of emails which with concerns and questions that I've compiled, given to the owners. They're going to address those. Before they do, though, just a couple of slides of introduction. For those that may remember or may not remember, the owners approached us as the GWA board back about 14 months ago, and they made a presentation in our AGM last year on November 3rd. You know, and that was focused more on their ideas at that point in time around the parking situation and how it could be improved. That's changed a bit, I think, in the community's favor, but that's not necessarily the center point of all our discussions. It is an important point, and I hope the owners will address it. We summarized, the minutes and the presentation are all available on the website, of course, for that AGM from last year, but the board summarized the whole idea of the presentation by the members as being supported by consensus at the AGM and acceptable to the GWA board. So let me get through this quickly so I can provide as much time as possible to the owners, okay? There's one other slide, and before we get into all the questions and concerns, there's a couple of remarks I received in writing from members that I just want to post here, just so we start off on a positive note, perhaps. You can read this for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and just one more. Okay, so hopefully we can have a good, productive, balanced conversation. I'm going to unmute each of the owners that'll be participating and then pass it over to them. Now I have to find you.
Can you hear me?
Good, yes, thank you.
Okay, good. Thanks, Tony. Hi, everyone. My name is Robin Leafers. I'll be speaking to you today on behalf of our group, who I'll introduce you to shortly. But first, I'd like to thank the GWA and its board for welcoming us here today to share our updates on the property. We value our relationship with the GWA and the community and appreciate being part of this meeting again this year, although it won't be the same without bingo. Let's hope we can get back to a live meeting next year. We want you to know that we have received your questions. Thank you for sending them in advance, and that we hear and understand your concerns, and we appreciate your care for our community. We will try to address as many of the most common questions during this presentation. However, due to our limited time, we ask that you hold all remaining questions to the end, at which point we'll have some additional time to answer any questions that we might not have covered. And please note, today's presentation, it's not an official component of the rezoning process, rather just a commitment on our end to continue to work with the GWA and its members and our neighbors, and to build a continued trusting relationship. And we'll get into the process later, and you can understand what the continued process and continued input through the actual process itself will be. If you want to flip to the next slide, Tony. Our group up is made up of the three families you see here. So the leftmost picture is me with my husband, Brian, who's also here beside me, and our two kids, Nick and Julia, and that's our dog, Portuguese water dog Breaker, there with us. And we live just down the road from you guys in Lower Gibsons. And our children attend Gibsons Elementary School. And we are in partnership with Vince, Lynette, and their teenage boys, Alex and Tyler, which you can see at the bottom there, and then Doug and Leslie, who are in the top right. And Doug has also been unmuted, so you may hear him chime in throughout this presentation. And all 6 of us are on the call today to hear your feedback. And we want you to know that we're not developers. We're simply friends who have a deep passion for saving the beauty and history of this house and a love of the Sunshine Coast that we'd like to share with others. Both Brian and I and Doug and Leslie currently run a short-term rental out in our homes. And so we have a lot of experience on how to run them respectfully and as part of a community. And we too are members of neighborhoods, and we want to run this property so that we would be comfortable living next to it ourselves. We have worked hard to try to be as open and engaging as possible with all the key stakeholders, the GWA and neighbors, SCRD, First Nations, Oceans and Fisheries, and Ministry of Transportation. And we're trying our best to follow all the outlined rules and requirements. So let's talk a little bit about our plan. Our plan for this property has 3 main components. Firstly, to restore the heritage and share the history of this property. Secondly, to provide tourist accommodations. And third, propose parking improvements. So to start with the heritage, our primary goal for this property is to preserve the heritage and share its history. We know this property is very significant to this community and has been identified in the official community plan for this area as an important piece of history and that the SCRD would like to preserve. We have had many ideas on how we could possibly do that, not only through building aesthetics, but also including photos, stories, suite names perhaps. This is one of the reasons that I personally am really passionate and excited about being involved in this project. Secondly, to provide tourist accommodation. We are proposing 4 self-contained guest suites in the main house and 1 self-contained suite in the cabin below. The intention is for each suite to be rented individually, thereby reducing the likelihood of large groups, as we know that can be a concern. Our vision is to offer the original post office area as a gathering place for guests, neighbors, and communities, such as possibly the Granthams Wharf Association meeting, summer barbecues, and community get-togethers. You may have noticed that the zoning amendment request uses the word lodge. The term lodge is one that is already referred to in the SCRD bylaws, and which is why we have used it. A lodge can be defined as 3 or more attached or detached sleeping units for temporary occupancy by transient persons and lodge staff, and which may include a restaurant and recreation facility for use of the tourists. The proposed number of units for this property is 5, and a restaurant is not currently proposed. Additionally, we will be installing a Type 3 septic system. Type 3 septic systems are custom designed sewage treatment plants that are capable of treating wastewater to a very high standard, producing a clear, odorless effluent. And the cabin septic would be connected to this same system. The third component I mentioned was proposed parking improvements. We heard in the GWA meeting last year that parking is and always has been one of the biggest concerns related to this property. We've heard you, and we've spent significant amounts of time and effort working on engineering design to find a solution that provides all required parking to meet the zoning bylaws within our property, not on the adjacent right-of-way. And be assured all guest parking would be completed prior to any guests arriving. Now our plan, as demonstrated by this graphic, shows proposed public parking in red. And this is subject, of course, to MOT approval. And our guest parking would be represented by the white cars. As you can see, the current public parking would not be impacted and could possibly be increased by additional cars on the extended driveway. The proposed driveway meets minimum width as per MOT requirements. However, this proposal remains subject to approval by the MOT. Finally, we would like to offer to improve the existing parking at the Granthams Wharf to improve aesthetics and for the benefit of the community. However, this is something that would need feedback from the GWA and approval by the MOT before we could proceed. So it is only in concept stage at this point in time. Flipping to the next slide. Now let's talk about our current status. So as many of you have likely seen, interior renovations, exterior painting, new roof and gutters are underway. We have been in consultation since the beginning of this project with the SCRD from a zoning and permitting perspective and have been transparent with our plans and our progress. The SCRD has provided us ongoing direction, and we will continue to work with them as the project progresses to ensure we are meeting all requirements. Secondly, in consultation with the professional arborist, the MOT, the GWA, and neighboring First Nations, a permit was approved to remove some of the failing trees on the property to ensure safety of all surrounding people and structures. Third, as you are likely aware, we have started the zoning amendment request process to expand the current commercial C2 zoning to include lodge. The current C2 zoning for this property permits a restaurant, retail store, personal service, office, tourist center, neighborhood pub, private club, and B&B. And the request to the SCRD is an amendment to its current commercial zoning to include a lodge. The property is currently not a residential property. We've had many questions related to the process, including neighbor notification methods and required notification periods. And please be assured we are strictly following the process and would kindly refer you back to the SRD for any clarification required regarding their zoning process and their requirements. And lastly, we are also in the process of applying for permits to reinforce the structure of the deck and the retaining wall. So yes, although it's not always evident from the exterior, this is a very complex project and a lot is going on behind the scenes. And this is just a quote from our SCRD contact, Yuli, just regarding, which I read earlier regarding exactly what the current zoning status is. And if you want to just flip to the last slide, there, Tony. Finally, we wanted to spend a few minutes answering a few more questions that we've been frequently asked. All right, so will you pay membership fees for your guests to use the Wharf, and how will you manage your guests using the Wharf? So all three families are and will continue to be members of the Granthams Wharf Association and have been working closely with the board to address any concerns that they have and to keep everyone as informed as our development plans continue. We have not purchased any dock fees, but are in discussions with the GWA as to whether it would be appropriate for us to maintain one GWA membership for each suite. We want to work with the GWA to find a mutually acceptable solution regarding the Wharf. We understand this is an important part of the community, and we will adhere to whatever the GWA rules. And I think we're in favor, speaking on behalf of all families, of everything that you've discussed tonight in terms of incremental fees or gates. I think we would be in favor of that. Secondly, can you provide an update on your plans for parking? I think that we went through that pretty much in detail, but can take questions after if there's further. Will there be an on-site caretaker, and how will you manage noise complaints? We are considering multiple methods of maintaining oversight of the activities on the property, including the possibility of having an on-site caretaker. Having a caretaker in one of the suites would provide this oversight, as well as services to our guests. Alternative methods to maintain positive community relations may include installing noise monitoring systems and providing contact information to neighbors for someone who is able to respond rapidly and in person to any unfavorable activities. We have a question here around water conservation. We are aware of the need to protect water as an important resource, especially in the SCRD, as we all know that water is a concern. We're doing everything inside the house in terms of installing low flow toilets or taps and any other water saving mechanisms that we can think of. And additionally, we will work and ask with our guests to minimize their water use whenever possible. We've discussed already the septic solution that we're looking at, and whether there will be a restaurant. There will not be, there's no plans currently to have a restaurant or a bar. And then finally, what public consultation steps are required by the SCRD planning for the rezoning? So this comes directly from the SCRD. The current community consultation in the forms of letters and the sign is the first step in the application process. After the applicant has completed preliminary public consultation and the SCRD has completed agency referrals regarding the application, a staff report with the proposed bylaws and a summary of public comments will be presented to the SCRD board for consideration. If the board gives first and second readings to the bylaws, a public hearing will be held, following which the board may consider a third reading of the bylaws and make a decision on whether or not to adopt the bylaws. Tony, that completes the presentation portion of our time today. Again, we value our ongoing continued partnership, and we thank everyone for zooming in today and providing feedback. And as discussed, we will remain online to answer subsequent questions. So I'll turn it back over to you, Tony.
Okay, thanks very much, Robin. Nikki, can you unmute yourself? Now, the original idea was that we would close the meeting on time, which it is right now, 5:30, and that if people wanted to stay on to discuss other questions with the owners, then that's possible for an additional 15 minutes or so. The owners have also offered to answer any questions that weren't addressed. They have offered to answer them in writing and then have them distributed through the GWA mailing list. So one of those two options is available, or perhaps both, for any outstanding questions. Nikki, are you unmuted?
Yeah, I am. So thank you, Robin. I know that it's an, you know, that this format that we're using, it might be frustrating because you don't have the back and forth for, you know, I'm speaking to all of you. We haven't been able to have the back and forth that we normally do in person. And I really hope that at least some of the concerns and questions and curiosities have been satisfied. I know we can't satisfy all of it. And as a community, I love to see that we all have our passionate interest, and I appreciate your time tonight. So we'll continue the important discussions. Don't hesitate to talk to us. Granthams Wharf at gmail.com is a good way to communicate with us. You can communicate with us individually if you wish. And we'll continue to try to represent you as best we can. We're not ever going to make everybody happy all at once. We kind of know that. So again, thanks very much for being here, and I'll hand this back over. I know that there are people who are here just specifically to be able to talk to the owners of the 808.
Do we need to officially close the AGM, or is that not necessary? What do you think, Nikki?
This is it.
It's closed. Okay.
The AGM is over. Our business is done. Our business is not, you know, anything else. So
okay.
I think that we're done, and we'll continue to do the best we can, and we'll continue.
Thanks, Nikki.
Thanks.
Okay, so Robin and Leslie and company, do you guys want us? You're able to stay on for another 15 minutes? Is that a yes or no?
We're fine to stay on as long as there's questions.
Okay, good. Now, do you want to address any of the other written questions that were provided, or do you feel like you've covered most of those in one form or another?
So one thing I can say is sort of what the plan is for the units. So there seems to be a question. So 3 of the units have 1 bed, and 2 of the units have, no, 4 of the units have 1 bed, and 1 unit has 2 beds.
Okay. So yeah, you've seen a lot of those questions coming up in the chat panel.
Yeah, about the number of people that would be there.
So what does that work out to? What would you say is typically the maximum number you would have in the lodge?
It's 10 to 12 at the most.
Gotcha. Okay.
But more likely 10.
Okay. So that's great. You just covered a bunch of questions there with that. Now, how do you want to proceed? Is that Doug that's talking?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
Doug that's speaking here. So
Do you want to refer to what's on the chat, or if there's questions in the written questions that you've got from them?
yeah, sure. We can respond to the questions in the chat. So I'll look through them now. So I answered the number of people. Does the rebuilding of the park include more intrusion into the hillside? Yeah. So that's where the driveway is. That is actually a requirement from the MOT for the width of a road. So we're just trying to meet all of the building or the bylaws that are required both from the SCRD and the MOT, and it requires the road to be that wide, which is about a 15-foot additional excursion in the one corner of it. So it cuts a little notch out of it. It sort of goes to where where some of those trees were before, not quite that far. It's well back still from the existing storage of the kayaks, as you can see in the picture. That picture, that's the true location of the kayaks. And we would, after we did the work, we had subject to, of course, agreement, and we would plan to landscape that entire area in a way that perhaps made it even better than what it is today, using natural or local fauna.
Yeah, those details we can discuss.
Yeah.
It's the MOT.
Yeah. So, like right now, it's relatively unmaintained, and if that's what is preferred, we can of course put it back to that after we finish construction. But we think there may be some improvements that could be made as well if the Wharf Association like that. I think that the clear thing is, like what that Robin said, is what we're trying to find is a mutually beneficial relationship where we can work very closely with the Granthams Wharf Association. Ultimately, you guys make the rules and we'll follow the rules, whatever they are. And we want to be very clear about that. Like, I think we tried to be very clear at the beginning when we first met with you about, yeah, we know that parking is not ours. We want to address that situation and improve and be great neighbors. So this is all things that we're doing subject to your approval. Would be the issue. Okay. In terms of a coffee shop or sandwich shop, so we've thought about that. We think something like that would exacerbate the parking problem in the area, and so we're not considering it at this time. And really, we have no plans to do it. The reason we say at this time is because technically, the C2 zoning does permit that. And we're very careful, but always saying what we will do and what, maybe 10 years from now, somebody decides to put a restaurant in there. So I doubt that is ever going to happen. But that's why we say it's not considered. We have no plans to do it. What we want to do is change the post office area into a meeting room, as we've said, and that's what we will be doing. Okay. Restaurant or bar. So the next question is, what does the MOT require in terms of next steps in development process? So we have to submit an application to the MOT in order to build that driveway and the retaining wall. It's all been engineered. So like the work is all being done, the drawings and stuff are done by professional engineers, and then that work gets submitted to the MOT, and the MOT will have to approve the ability for us to put that retaining wall on their property. Yeah, so the revolving door of strangers using our wharf, we for sure understand that's a concern. So what we're trying to do is to see if there's a way we can partner with Granthams Wharf, where it's worthwhile to allow our guests to be able to use the wharf. And that would include both monetary and, by buying the additional memberships, and also additional maintenance of the area and helping out with the maintenance of the dock. Of course, it's up to you, and whatever rules you guys decide is what we will adhere to. So it's not, okay. I'd like them to, it says, Okay, this question is from Lee. You have red cars on the post office. Is that on the road allowance too? I'm not sure which red cars are being referred to.
I think what's going on, Doug, if you don't mind me saying, is there has been some confusion as to where the property line is between the 808 and the MOT right of way.
Yeah.
So I think this person's just looking for clarity that.
So the property line is actually along the front wall of the post office. So technically, the overhang there is actually overhanging onto MOT property. So where and you can see the black road. That's the new road we would be putting in or hoping to put in. Where it ends is where our property line effectively begins. And the green area there is actually where the class 3 septic treatment plant would go. And it will have a much better treatment of sewage than currently exists on the site today, which is not ideal. So basically we'll be pumping everything up from the cabin up to the top and treating it. And it's essentially, when you have a class 3 plant, it's basically water that comes out of it. And so that's, we're of course very concerned about maintaining the waterfront, the use of the waterfront property, and not having any septic leak into the ocean. So we're planning to put a very good treatment plant in. The question is, existing parking plan that you've shown in the model fully feasible? So yes, it does. The stalls that are shown there, and it may be a little odd in this drawing because it's a perspective drawing, but those stalls fit the minimum guidelines that are in the SCRD zoning bylaw. So we've considered that when we did it. Okay, where would the septic? Yeah, so would you have cars? So yes, there would be cars parking on the septic field. So again, we're working on that with an engineer. It is possible to construct that. You basically put down the field. The field is quite small because it's a class 3, and most of the treatment is done in treatment tanks. But then you have a geogrid that supports the soil over the drain field. So that's possible and what we will do.
Questions been by an engineer.
Yeah, all of the drawings are done by engineers. What are the setbacks for type 3? So the setbacks depend on the type of the type of the construction that you're building. So the general setback for houses on type 3 is 5 meters. The house is grandfathered in because it's closer to the property than that. So anything that you would build that is considered a building that is within 5 meters of the property line would require a variance if you're going to do that. That's effectively how it works. But we're not planning to do any additional construction over and above the retaining wall. Like the house and the cabin are staying exactly the same as they were.
This one here, second part of the question.
So the guests will not be permitted to park in the public spaces. That's why we're putting the property on ours. So we've done a lot of work to make sure that it does fit. And that's why we're trying to build that retaining wall there on our property. Yeah, okay, there has been a problem parking roadside front. Will this be improved? So that unfortunately is not something beyond that's part of our control. We've talked to the MOT about that, and they're quite leery to make any changes along the roadside front. We hope we can make the changes that are sort of in the area in front of the house and in front of the neighbor's house, because those are off the road and technically they're on the side of the road there. My expectation is that improvements will not be able to be made that are along Marine Way. We would be happy to make them because we think we could improve it, but that is in the MOT control. And the MOT, when we spoke to them about that, they were not extremely supportive of that idea.
Okay. Do you mind if we unmute Tom? Tom Lewis would like to be unmuted.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it. Go ahead and you might be able to unmute yourself, Tom.
Yeah, I think we are. Are you? Yeah, I think we are. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Hi. Okay. Hi, Robin, Doug. Thanks a lot for coming on. I appreciate that. I wrote a letter to Tony. I think he's passed it on to you, and I had about 9 or 10 questions. And I'm kind of representing about, I don't know, 8 or 10 households along the Granthams area. Most of us got your letter, and so I sent those questions on. Did you get those?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, if they're the ones that Tony forwarded to us, then we received.
There weren't names associated with them, so we don't know if they were yours or somebody else's.
I can verify that there were 7 pages of questions, including all the questions that your group sent, Tom. Yeah.
Okay. Appreciate it. So yeah, you've answered a bunch of questions, but just a few other things. You talked about the suites being fully contained. So does each suite have a bathroom and a kitchen then?
Yeah, they each have a bathroom. I wouldn't say they each have a kitchen. They may have like a kitchenette.
Okay. Is there a communal kitchen as well, or everybody's on their own? Okay.
Everybody's on their own.
Okay, right on. Okay.
Yeah, that was, Robin spoke to that. That, like, the problem often is when people rent whole houses as big party houses, that's where you tend to get large groups that are quite noisy. Our intent is not to do that with this property. They're separate units, and the combined cost to rent the whole house would be quite expensive. So we believe that will be one of the primary ways to keep down noise, actually.
Okay. I've also been following up with Yuli, the planner with SCRD, and he'd mentioned to me that there was a current stop work order by SCRD on the place. I just wanted to explain what happened there and why you're non-compliance.
Sure. Yeah. So that's not actually related to the zoning, but I'm happy to talk about that. So we talked to the SCRD at the beginning, and they said, as long as you don't move any window, what we understood from them, as long as you don't move any windows or change the position of the doors, you can undertake the renovation without a permit. So that's what we started doing. When we took down the interior walls, because we wanted to redo the insulation in the house, not the interior walls, the interior surface, the construction of the house was in poor repair in many areas. So one of the things that we need to do is replace headers over the windows. And we had a local construction person doing it from the area that's grown up in the area. And so he was managing the construction and he replaced those headers. Now, what we found out, and because we've been trying to do everything properly, we had applied for the permits for the reconstruction of the deck and the wall. When they went to the site to start doing those inspections related to those, they saw that these headers had been replaced in the windows. And what they told us is that those are structural elements. And because they're structural elements, you need to have a building permit for it. So for that reason, we had a stop work order. We talked to them and they said, you need to just submit drawings for that. And that's what we're doing right now. So I mean, we feel bad about it, but it was definitely not something where we're trying to skirt the law, because we've been talking to them the whole time. I think it was a misunderstanding between our builder about what was permitted and what we actually did without a building permit.
Okay, appreciate that.
Yep.
Also with the planning process, I see we got letters. Some of our neighbors did. We're just wondering how many letters went out.
I don't know how many letters. So basically, that process is followed strictly by what the SCRD told us to do. So we submitted to them. They gave us the list of names to send because we don't know who to send them to, and we strictly did what they told us to. Okay. I don't know what the count of numbers was, but like if people were missed, unfortunately, that's not something we can really control. We're just following, in that case, what the MOT has told us to do. SCRD, sorry, what the SCRD has told us to do.
And they gave you the December 15th deadline too? That's the final?
Yeah, they're the ones. Basically, we went to them and said, this is what we'd like to do. What is the process? So everything related to the process and the timelines and the dates and who we mail, that's all strictly them telling us what to do, because we have no idea. The one thing I'd like to add is when we approached the Granthams Wharf Association last year and this meeting again, they're over and above anything that's required by the process. It's because we're very interested in seeking feedback from the local people and making sure we're good neighbors and trying to address all of the questions. So this is, to be clear, this is not a necessary part of the zoning process. This is because we actually want to hear and care and want to make a good spot in the neighborhood.
Okay, appreciate that. Just a couple more questions, because I don't want to take all the time up. Just a little bit more on the septic field and septic tank. I think it's a good idea to put a type 3 system in. However, there's still you still need a field for those things. I think there is a setback distance. And I also have been told by engineers that you shouldn't be building parking lots on top of septic systems. So just a concern, because that whole lot, it's got a lot of underground water coming through there, a lot of seepage that comes onto the beach right now. And you're adding more people, more toilets, more septic, even though you're saying it's clear water, it's really not. It's effluent and it's from a septic system. I'm just concerned that that's not being really addressed as well as it should be.
Yeah, so we're working with an engineer to make sure we meet all the requirements of current standards. So it's not something that we're deciding or doing on our own. We're working with a sanitation engineer from there, and like, I can assure you that it will be better than what's there today. But I don't know if I can address it more than that, than saying that we're going to make sure we have all the proper permits to do everything. And also it's being designed by engineers. It's not something that we're just putting in. So
yeah,
by
law you can't do that anymore. You have to have an engineer design.
Exactly. And so anything that, like the parking on top, you do have to buy, like, you have to do an extra expense to, of course, make sure that that's possible by properly reinforcing the surface, which is what we want to do. And so again, that's engineered. So, you know, the engineers are like, yes, you can definitely do this. It's products that have come into the market in the last 10 years. And this is how you do it for that size of lot.
Okay, appreciate that. One last question, then I'm out of here. I guess one of our big bugbears is this thing is zoned. You say it is commercial, I agree with that. But for the Airbnb parts, it's zoned for 2 units and then a third one where the owner lives there. And just recently, there's new regulations by the SCRD restricting Airbnbs to a maximum of 2 units as long as the owner's living there. And of course, your rezoning is kind of getting rid of that and putting a 5-unit in with maybe nobody living there. So that's our biggest concern, I think. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little different than other properties because it's a commercial property, and it does have certain uses, but that's why we have to go through the zoning process. And yeah, we'll follow the rules that we have to follow, I guess. But thanks for your feedback.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
One other question: is there any other examples of lodges on the coast that you know of?
I don't know. It's not something we've researched. So, like, most people operate without going through this process. Like, they just start doing something, and so then it's not necessarily registered. The reason a lot of this discussion comes up is because we're trying to be open and transparent about what we want to do from the very beginning.
Yeah, I asked SCRD about it, and they couldn't provide any examples either, so I thought you might know of some.
Yeah, no, I don't. I mean, the thing is, most people to this point, because they haven't had the Airbnb bylaws, they just do whatever they want, right? And that wasn't even our approach before at the beginning, because we wanted to be good members in the community and make sure we did things properly. And those bylaws have actually come in since we started. But yeah, most people just operate without even doing any of this consultation and just start operating. And then that's how they end up causing a lot of trouble to their neighbors, which is not what we want to do at all.
Okay, thank you very much.
In answer to Tom's last question, Emily submitted the idea that Bonnybrook Lodge is another example of a lodge on the coast. You see it there in the chat.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. I think I really appreciate you you folks being available. I don't know if there's any outstanding questions left in the package I gave you that needs to be responded to. And are there any bits and pieces here before we sign off? It's almost 6 o'clock.
Okay, so there's.
Oh, yeah.
When will the MOT parking be complete relative? So So we could not open the lodge until we had our own parking in place, which pretty much requires building that whole, well, it does require building that, getting the permits for everything and moving, or building the driveway down to our property.
Right.
So that'll all have to be built before we're able to open the lodge.
Right. Okay. All right. Yeah. You see that last statement? Thanks to the owners for seeking input from our community. Greatly appreciate it. And I think concerns can be sent directly to SCRD or perhaps to you folks directly. I'm not sure, but the proper process.
My email address is on, so my email address is douglasgertson@gmail.com. You can send that out to your members, but that email address is on the sign that's in front of our property, as well as the contact for Yuli, who is the planner at SCRD that's managing the process.
So those two email addresses, Yuli's and yours, are on the sign. Okay,
yeah, we've got quite a few questions. We try to respond as quickly as we can.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. I mean, the GWA's position here is, you know, we try to represent the community. We don't really have any authority for yay or nay, but if we can facilitate communication among the members of the community, then that's a positive thing. And I hope it's worked for everybody tonight. I really appreciate, I think the whole board appreciates the fact that the owners came forward and made themselves available. And I hope people are satisfied to some extent, at least, with the answers that they've heard. Okay, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate you allowing us to present, Tony, and it's been, thank you very much for that. It's been very helpful for us. And,
great, yeah, I think it's been good all around. So I hope
what we're really looking for is a mutually beneficial situation where it's win for everybody.
Right. And of course, I mean, the real clincher, like the regulations you have to follow, I appreciate you saying a number of times that, you know, whatever the GWA comes up with, your group is willing to follow. But the real clincher, of course, are the regulations put out, the bylaws and the permits required by the SCRD and by the MOT, correct?
Yep. Yeah. No. I mean, those we have to follow without question, right? So,
right. So in addition to those, in addition to those,
process the whole time. As I mentioned, you know, we have, you know, the question came up about the stop work order and why that is. Like we're not trying to hide anything. We've never been trying to hide anything.
Right.
Sometimes mistakes get made, unfortunately, and so we're just trying to make sure we, you know, can get any input from the city and the community in order to minimize any problems in the future.
Right. Well, thanks for being available for that. Really appreciate it. And unless Nikki has some final words, I think it's supper time for everybody over there now. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nikki.
Yeah. Hi, I just want to, this is outside of the GWA, as I said before when we started, but I'd really like to thank you, Doug and the whole company for being so open and transparent. And it's been a pleasure meeting you, and I feel that you are already good neighbors. Mm-hmm. So I hope that we all can, you know, enjoy being neighbors.
Great.
Okay.
We hope so too.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.